This is Talk the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up today, it's Fulham next after beating the top two. Should be straightforward, shouldn't it? We'll preview that game. Patrick Dorgu, unfortunately, is out for 10 weeks. We'll take a look at how United can look to cover for the man of the moment. And we'll have more detail on Harry Maguire's future, some last-minute transfer detail, maybe, and an old face returning to the youth team coaching staff as well. We've got Carl, Critch and Andy with us, so hello everyone. How we doing? You okay? Another good week? Smiles all round still?
Still doing the Cunha dance, mate. How are you?
How many times have you pulled that off, Carl? I saw something online, just people randomly doing it, boiling the kettle, buttering bread, posting letters, if people still do that.
Yeah. 7 times on the Monday, start to finish. And then I think I did it once when a mate asked me how I was doing on Wednesday. Just how you doing? I just went, boom. And then once while we're waiting to pop on the kettle. So it still works.
It's been a good week. It's been a good week again. Go back and have a look at our reaction to the Arsenal result if you've not listened or watched that already. There's also a Talk the Devils extra in there too. Lots of questions answered, including some detail about who could be next for Manchester United as the permanent boss in the summer. But it has been a good week. We've had good weeks before though, Andy, haven't we? And they've not always been followed up. Now, the City result was followed up with the Arsenal result. Will that be followed up with a result against Fulham?
I think that's the main point, Ian. Teams have come to Old Trafford where the form has been patchy, and teams below Manchester United in the table, the team have struggled to break them down. So I think people are looking for a change. You know, United couldn't beat 10-men Everton, couldn't beat struggling West Ham, scored 4 against Bournemouth but didn't win. The Wolves game's probably more important than all of them. I mean, that led directly to Ruben Amorim losing his job because there was a feeling among the players that Manchester United should concentrate on their own strengths rather than the strengths of a team who'd not won a game. So can United overcome Fulham? Fulham are 7th. Fulham are a decent side. They're better than the other teams that I've mentioned. They're in form. They're only 4 points behind Manchester United. They've got a manager who Manchester United spoke to with regards to replacing Eric Ten Hag. But it's been a good week. Back to your first point, there's still a gentle glow. And because there's no Champions League football, no European football, it's just sort of lasts all week. A year ago today, we were in Bucharest watching Manchester United. There's a big following out there for that Europa League game. And that was the focus. And a week like this week, there's just focusing on the last match and what's to come while everyone else plays in Europe or most of your main rivals.
My eyebrows jumped up my face when you went, Fulham are a decent side.
Yeah, I saw those eyebrows as well, Carl. Man did the same. Critch, it's not the game that maybe Wolves was, or Everton even though they've improved since, or West Ham. Fulham are 7th. If they win, they're only a point behind United. Like Andy said, Marco Silva is a very well-respected manager as well, but it is a game you'd expect United to win, or at least on paper, they would be expected to win. Fulham have only won away to United twice since 1963. These are all the sort of ingredients, though, that make us a little bit nervous, aren't they? And do you think this is a truer test, really, of where United are at than maybe the last two? Seems a strange thing to say in some ways.
It is, but it feels like something that a lot of people have been saying this week, and I can understand why. We have got used to situations where this United team has to take the initiative and they're expected to play on the front foot and dominate a team. They haven't been doing it. And so I can see why people are looking at this as a particular test with that. It's become a recurring theme with this team, and not really just this season, but in previous seasons too, but especially this season. I was looking at the table before, and I think it's now that United have dropped points against 7 of the bottom 8 since the start of November. There's 7 draws in there. I think they were leading 6 of those games. So it's effectively, that's 12 points that were on the table at one point in a match, and United haven't taken them. And look, this is really silly, so silly. I almost don't even want to say it because it's not how football works, but I'll give you a few facts. United have 38 points. We're saying they've dropped 12. Arsenal are top of the league with 50, and 38 plus 12 is 50. So imagine where they could be if they had been taking these opportunities. And that was the frustration.
You're saying there's
right?
a chance, Critch?
I'm not saying there's a chance. We're not getting carried away or not getting Carricked away even, but perhaps if things have worked out differently, then we'd be looking at a very different Premier League table. But I think you could say that for a lot of teams this season. I think during that period where United were dropping those points, where were Fulham in the table? They were right down at the bottom, scrapping for their lives. And now they've had a few good results and they've turned things around. So it's volatile. And I don't think we can read too much into anything because of that. But for the one thing I would say is that we talk about United taking the initiative and how they'll have to do that on Sunday, and it might be quite different from the last two games. I felt like United did take the initiative in these last two games. I felt like even though they didn't always have the ball,
definitely.
the City game definitely, but I think also even from about 25 minutes onwards on Sunday at the Emirates, they were playing. The game was played on their terms. Like, they didn't have the ball, but they were almost controlling the game without the ball, and that's something that we've not seen, I think, in the past when United have got those sorts of results against the top sides. And so that gives me a little bit of, I don't know, just a little bit of hope, really, that going into Sunday, it's a different psychology, isn't it, if you are the protagonists of a game? And I feel like United have been the protagonists of the game in the last two as well. So maybe they can carry that forward, and maybe that'll help them pick up some points where we usually expect them to pick up points.
Carl, question from Steve. Our defence has looked so solid against City and Arsenal. I don't know if it did look solid against Arsenal. It did for majority of the game, but there were moments where it didn't. Anyway, they starved the opposition of chances in both matches. That's probably true. Maguire and Martinez have excelled defending deep and dominating forwards. Can this be replicated against a team like Fulham?
I think so. I think the defensive shape from United right now has been really, really good. That when they don't have the ball, it's a relatively compact 4-4-2 under Michael Carrick. I mentioned before, it reminds me a little bit of how England used to defend, which is probably the Steve Holland connection there too. There's not too much pressure on the ball when they don't have the ball. They're not really pressing high in the way that, say, Ralf Rangnick perhaps wanted, or indeed Erik ten Hag perhaps wanted. I don't think they want to put too much pressure on Casemiro's legs when they're out of possession. And I think that also helps this whole, like, not too much pressure, don't press the ball too high. It also probably helps Harry Maguire, who, for of his many strengths, isn't the best when he has to turn around and retreat toward his own goal. So out of possession structure, I'm fairly confident about. On level, not too worried about. I think Fulham and Marco Silva as a coach is very, very good at platforming his best players. He makes sure his most talented players in the final third get onto the ball the most. You're not really seeing some of the problems that we had towards in some of the darker periods under Ruben Amorim, where you were looking at a touch map and you're going, okay, why is the wing back getting far more touches than any of your attacking tens and Bruno Fernandes? Silva makes sure the good players get the ball the most. The bit I'm slightly nervous about is this incredible uptick in form from Harry Wilson, who seems to be pinging it in from everywhere. So, United have had two brilliant long-range goals against Arsenal, and Manchester United need to be wary of Wilson and others having that sort of effect there. But defensive-wise, I think out of possession, and also the way Maguire's in a good run of form, I think Martinez is in a really good run of form on both sides of the ball. So when he's doing his defending, but also when he's got the ball at his feet, making line-breaking passes too. I'm not confident, but I'm calmer than I used to be.
Yeah, I just feel a bit uncomfortable having this conversation, Andy. I don't know about you, because it feels like we have had it so many times. I think back to even last season and remember them drawing at Liverpool and then knocking Arsenal out of the FA Cup. And, the players seemed to be so determined that was the level. And going forward, that's what Manchester United were. And then in the following match, it took 3 late goals from Ahmad to beat Southampton, who were really struggling at the time. The game after that, they lost to Brighton. And it just feels like we've been here before. And that's why I feel like this is the proper test of whether Michael Carrick has completely transformed this side in the space of a couple of weeks, which even in itself seems like a ridiculous thing to say.
I think everything you say is fair comment there. And the uncertainty is because we've seen Manchester United stumble against so many teams, especially at Old Trafford. United have shown in the last 2 games that they can go away to the top team and win. play against the second place team at Old Trafford and win. So it's a different game scenario. This isn't a game where Manchester United would expect to have 30 to 40% of possession and hit on counter. And Carl touched on the tactical side of things there. I thought the Fulham game in August was one of the most intriguing matches because United actually played well. Only got a draw. United have drawn too many games this season. The difference between United and Fulham is that while they've both won 10 games, United have picked up them draws, and in a positive way, that's given United a gap over Fulham. But Fulham have come into form. They play a 4-2-3-1 formation, which is not dissimilar to what Manchester United are using now. It's really intriguing. Same with Tottenham at home next week. These are two games which United drew in the first half of the season, and now there will be more expectation for Manchester United to win those games. The games are at Old Trafford. The uncertainty comes about because it's been so uncertain so far this season, but not under Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick has got a 100% record so far. And how much has he turned it around? Confidence is certainly high. He does have players back from AFCON, from injury. We'll talk more about losing Patrick Dorgu in a bit. But this, to me, is almost as important as those last two matches. If Manchester United can win at home against Fulham without the drama that has accompanied previous home matches, then that will be a massive feather in Michael Carrick's cap that he can do that. Because for many years, United did win home and away against Fulham. And that 1963 stat is true, but Fulham were out of the top division for 30 of those years. You know, when I grew up, Fulham were a team who got 7,000 or 8,000, and then they benefited from Mohamed Al Fayed and that West London location. And they have been well run, and it's a good club, and it's a lovely stadium. And now they're established in the top flight with a good manager. And unfortunately, they're in form. Let's smash them, Manchester United.
I was there at Old Trafford for Fulham's last victory. So that was on the Eric Ten Hag where I think it's Alex Iwobi gets a goal right at the death. And I remember
after
coming
Maguire had scored right at the death.
Yeah. And that, to me, felt like an indication that all wasn't well in the Eric Ten Hag regime, and he lasted a lot longer than I thought he would last after that. But yeah, Fulham are a decent side. They're no mugs. They've got 2 or 3 players that have given United a real tough time in recent seasons. I think Iwobi was fantastic during AFCON. Probably should have won player of the tournament in my eyes. And I think he's really come on leaps and bounds, and especially when he's allowed to play through the middle. Calvin Bassey is a football player I am endlessly entertained by, and he really gave Ahmad and Mbeumo a tough time at Craven Cottage in August. He preferably likes to defend touch tight. And if you are a slightly smaller forward, which Ahmad is, that can cause some difficulty. He's very, very good in the air. So Manchester United set-piece threat and whipping in crosses doesn't necessarily hurt Bassey. And he's got the recovery pace too. He's a good football player. This is not me saying Manchester United should buy him, okay, listeners? I'm just saying he's a football player who has given United trouble in the past. So getting past him will be, I'm sure Carrick and his coaching staff will be having that on a whiteboard somewhere going, how do we deal with Calvin Bassey?
It's a step into the unknown, Critch, a little bit for Michael Carrick as Manchester United boss as well, because the one major feature of the matches he's had in charge in his previous spell and this one is that United have been up against top opposition. Now, Fulham are not, bottom of the league. They are 7th, like we said before, but you think he's faced, Mikel Arteta a couple of times, Pep Guardiola, Unai Emery and Thomas Tuchel. Silva's not far off that company, to be fair, but this is a different proposition going up against a side where the full expectation is that United should win.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's partly why we're only going to really know what a Michael Carrick United team looks like. Maybe, I wouldn't even say after Sunday, maybe in a month's time, once we've had a broader sample of the level of teams within this league that we know how he likes to set up against. So far, I mentioned this the other day, but it's felt like, and Carrick himself has made a point of saying he is adapting and changing things according to the opponents. And he feels like that is what he needs to do, because not necessarily that there's a huge gap in quality between Arsenal and City and United, but that you just need to respect who you're up against and try and, work against their strengths and weaknesses. There's a bit more license to play your own way against a side like Fulham, with all due respect, or most of the sides that United will come up against, certainly when they're at home. And so I think that's going to be intriguing. I don't know whether he'll change too much, simply because it's hard to make that argument after how good those two results, but also performances were these past 2 weekends. And so there is there's a strong argument to try and stick with mostly the team as it was, but his hand's going to be forced to an extent. Dorgu's obviously out. We'll see what effect that has. And I feel that we will get that stronger, more fully formed idea of what Carrick's style essentially is, maybe on Sunday and then in the weeks going forward.
Yeah, we'll talk about the team that we think Michael Carrick might go with in just a moment. But another feature of Sunday, Carl, are the protests that are planned by the 1958 group, which will be taking place predominantly before the game. For anyone who's not seen any of the messaging or understand what the protests are about, what have the 1958 said?
Yep, I'm going to read a statement that came out on January 27th. And it was, our protest has never been about performances on the pitch, not now and not once in the last 21 years. We are judging a dysfunctional ownership model that has repeatedly failed Manchester United. It seems the central point of tension for this protest in particular is about how the 1958 believes the current ownership model is exploiting fan loyalty and looking to make the match-going experience more expensive in order to pay off any accumulated or financial stresses that Manchester United Football Club have. There's no Europe, price has gone up, and also it's a lot harder to buy tickets and almost exchange tickets if you cannot make a game as well. And this seems to be the central point of the 1958 protest. On Sunday, I intend to be present for some of it. I'll take photographs of people who wish to be taken photographs of and who wish to say anything on the record, and we'll probably catch up with them again next week.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will be interested to read that and to understand how people are feeling who are protesting. Andy, obviously the last two results, I'm sure people will be looking at and saying, does this change the mood? Does this change the sentiment of how Manchester United fans are feeling at the moment? And at least in the performance, I'm sure it will, but it's only short term, clearly. And some of the frustrations that the fans groups have spoken about are not about results. They're more about the ticketing issues that Carl just detailed. Can you understand why there is some frustration still about the way that fans are feeling the club is treating them at the moment?
Yeah, and even within your question, there's a couple of points there. I think United fans get very annoyed when rival fans accuse them of changing the tune after a couple of wins or defeats. Some of the strongest protests against the Glazers, and these have been happening for over 20 years, have been when Manchester United have been, by a distance, the best team in England, sometimes in Europe. I don't think the stance has changed on the Glazers from the vast majority of Manchester United fans. And then you've got other issue, and I think it's legitimate to protest against the Glazers for that takeover that should never have happened. I saw this week the independent regulator is trying to stop something like that happening again, whereby football clubs can be purchased, community assets can be purchased with highly leveraged debt. And what you have at Manchester United now is you have the Ineos side of things. So they're making decisions, and I think they've got something right. I think recruitment has definitely improved. I think we're seeing that in performances on the pitch. But this is all separate to the Glazers. And then there's the issues that you talk about, like ticket prices, like ticket allocations, frustration among the obligation to attend a certain number of home games, among the hardcore fans for ticket checks and stuff like that. These are real talking points among Manchester United's match-going support and real concerns as well. So that is a context to why some fans feel it's the right thing to protest.
You listen and watch us, and now we want to hear from you. We're asking you if you can fill out a quick survey on your podcast habits by going to theathletic.com/survey26. 3 lucky entries will win £100 or $100 worth of Amazon vouchers as well. So whether you're a long-time listener or you've only just found us, we want to get your feedback. Head to theathletic.com/survey26. That's theathletic.com/survey26. 26th. There's a link in our episode description as well. Thank you. Let's get back to the podcast. Okay, let's talk about the Manchester United team news then for the weekend. I mean, the major development that we've had since the Arsenal game is the news that Dorgu wasn't suffering with cramp. Actually, Patrick Dorgu had done his hamstring and he's potentially missing, pending some further checks, for up to 10 weeks, which is a big blow to the team, but such a cruel blow to the player, Carl, who's just on top of the world after scoring that goal at the Emirates. You know, he won match, I'd not heard of it before, but he'd won player of the match round in the Premier League. He's been nominated for the Manchester United Player of the Month as well, which are just two signs of just how high his level has been in these last few games. It's just really cruel.
Yeah, really cruel. Devastating. He was really beginning to figure it out. I mentioned before about Bruno Fernandes going, go and celebrate, lad. And indeed, there's the Newcastle game where Casemiro gives him a big playful shove in the back of, go on, lad. And it felt like the Manchester United group was getting behind him and he was getting some wind in these sails and he was really going to step on. And we were even having conversations of, is he a left back? Is he a left winger? Is he, I mean, people making jokes about how he's, you know, Gareth Bale's godson. And it's like, hang on, you've taken the Gareth Bale comparisons too far now by getting a hamstring injury. Calm down. So 10 weeks suggests that's a grade 2 hamstring tear. So the muscle's not completely come off the bone, but it's been heavily ruptured. This is the sort of real silver lining, clutching at straws things. Because Manchester United aren't in any cup competitions, he's not actually going to miss that many games.
What is it, about 4?
I think close to 8, maybe.
Oh, was it that many? Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean,
there's that period in March where it feels like they don't actually play football at any point.
Yeah. So, I mean, 10 weeks from now means he could possibly, in theory, return for when Leeds United go to Old Trafford on April 11th. But even then, it's like, it's gutting in that there's enough bodies at left back, I think. So left back is covered. But then if you want to talk about the left wing options, you got to do a little bit more tinkering. I'm supposed to be writing a piece on it today, but you know me, when I disappear into Wisecout for too long.
Yeah, we'll expect that at some point in the not too distant future, Carl. There are options, Critch. I mean, I've got an email here from Daryl. It says, will it mean that Mount gets a shout on the left, or will he start Cunha there? Or will he shift things around and play Sesko up front and put Mbumo and Ahmad on the wings? I suddenly feel like we have tons of options. And that's true, actually. You could see 3, maybe 4 ways that Carrick could change things to replace Dorgu in the starting 11.
That's true, and that's what this squad feels like when mostly everybody is fit, as they have been for the last few weeks, apart from Matthijs de Ligt. There are options. We have, though, had those experiences this season where, I don't know, when Sesko was injured, for example, then you looked at the bench and you were like, how do you change things off it? And I don't know if we're going to go into one of those periods now. I think it's really... It is cruel, and it's a cruel blow for Dorgu himself, but it's a cruel blow for United because he brought something to that front line, which I think maybe the other options who could step in for him, whether it's Mount, whether it's Cunha, they don't quite have. Yeah. He was bringing a certain level of tenacity, of intensity, of real physicality into that role and into that position. I think I saw a stat yesterday on Sky that he'd had 60 sprints over the past 2 games against City and Arsenal, and that was, I think, 13 more than the next most, which was Luke Shaw and Bruno.
That's how you do your hamstring, mate.
Well, exactly right. So perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised, and maybe it's a sort of sad consequence of that. I think was he not sprinting forward to try and get onto a long pass towards the end of the game, and that's how we did it. So
he's won more ground duels than any other player this season for United as well in the league. So there are lots of different aspects to his game in that regard.
Absolutely, and I don't think one thing we can say about Dorgu where let's face it, there have been moments this season where we've been like, what's his best position? Is he really settling in? Does he need a bit more time? Does he need to be taken out of the side even?
Should he be starting? Yeah, exactly.
Should he be starting? But what you've never really questioned about him is his effort and willingness, and he was always a keen and able runner on the pitch. And I think that we definitely saw that over the last couple of games, and maybe that's had a factor in him actually being ruled out. You get that, don't get me wrong, you get that certainly from Mason Mount, you get that from Matthias Cunha. They just don't quite have that. I don't know if it's just a sort of physical burst that you expect from Patrick Dorgu, and I think that is something that United will miss in his absence, whoever sort of replaces him.
I wonder, Andy, the types of qualities that we're talking about with Dorgu and the types of features that he's really shone with in these last couple of matches, I wonder if Fulham will actually present the same sort of opportunities to United. Direct running in behind and all those sort of things. Doesn't feel like if Fulham are playing in more of a low block at the weekend that there'll be as many opportunities to exploit that. And maybe someone like Matheus Cunha, who's had an amazing impact off the bench as well, in these last two games, whether he would be suited to this match, because it could need something a little bit more maverick to unlock a team like Fulham potentially.
So you're going to miss Dorgu's, quote, elite physical attributes. That's what first attracted Manchester United to him. You're quite right to point out he's totally different from the other players there. He has been too inconsistent, and yet he's found consistency for a young player. United is still on balance in a really good position with injuries, can field a strong bench, and there's been times in the last month when that has not been the case. So a real luxury you can bring off Cunha to make an impact. And I think he will be especially motivated because he'd lost his place in the team. And I think Fulham away in August, he started the game absolutely brilliantly and faded like the team did. So Cunha has seen, if I'm not up to scratch here, I'm not going to be playing. And that wasn't what was on the tin when he signed for Manchester United. So he can see it as an opportunity to re-establish himself in the first 11. You could say the same about Benjamin Sesko, but slightly different for him given the system that Michael Carrick seems to be playing. So I'd see it as an opportunity for Cunha, for Mason Mount. There are players who can play in that position. It's only 6 weeks ago that Patrick Dorgu wasn't getting in anybody's idealised 11.
Yeah,
it's only
true.
Since that Newcastle first half where people have sat up and taken real notice of him. And that's not people flip-flopping, that's people judging him on his performances. I thought it was interesting that Carl picked out some of the physical attributes of the Fulham players. That is also valid. They've got some players who can really damage Manchester United. But I'd see it as a blow that Dorgu's out, but an opportunity for players like Mount, who's had a good season. These are players who weren't featuring a year ago. They weren't getting in. And Cunha, who should feel especially motivated, and why not, given that goal he scored at the weekend, to go, all right, I've lost my place. I know I've got to raise my game. There's a World Cup finals coming up in a few months. I've got to get my act together and be the best version of me in the few games that Manchester United have got remaining this season.
Yeah, the thing with Cunha is it's not even like he's not been at his best. He's played brilliantly and he still didn't find his way into the starting 11 for either of the games. So, yeah, I think it is going to be an interesting aspect to see which way Michael Carrick goes. Benjamin Sesko almost is a forgotten man of this front line as well, and he was the one mainly in form, obviously, when Darren Fletcher was in temporary charge for his couple of matches, at least goal-scoring form anyway. The other aspect to this is Luke Shaw, because Patrick Dorgu obviously was the automatic other option at left back for United. Now there's Dalot and Mazraoui who can play on that side, and we saw that a lot last season. But quietly, Luke Shaw has put together the best run he's ever had in the Premier League for Manchester United in terms of starting matches. He started all 23 league games so far this campaign, and that is the longest run that he's ever had since he arrived at Old Trafford 12 years ago. In fact, there's only 3 campaigns where he started more league games than this run in the entire season. And that's across 12 years, like I say. So, Carl, he's doing really well, Shaw, staying fit. He's kind of, although this conversation is in contrary to it, he's kind of pushing away concerns about his fitness. We've not really given him much praise, to be honest, across this campaign, despite the fact that he's played in all these matches. But he has been very good all season, really. There's only maybe a couple of times where his level has dropped. Does he deserve more credit than he's getting for what he's been able to do in fitness and in form?
I think a season where Luke Shaw is consistent tends to be a season where Manchester United do well. His skill set.
So is that chicken and egg? Is it United's form that brings the best out in him, or is his best form bringing the best out in United?
I am leaning more towards the latter. I think there are very particular seasons where United are competing for making deep runs in cup competitions, or indeed, let's say the goal scorers are having really good runs of form. That I think a lot of that has to do with Luke Shaw. I would make the argument that Marcus Rashford's better seasons occur in seasons where Luke Shaw is playing the majority of minutes, because Luke Shaw used to be able to get up and down and do overlapping runs, which allowed Rashford to come inside, and Shaw's crossing ability also allowed players like Cavani and Martial to spend more time in the box and getting a greater supply. Now, Shaw's 23 matches consecutive, I'm pulling a face here, could some of that do with the fact that he's played quite a bit this season as a left-sided centre-back and doesn't have to put as much minutes in his legs or as much intensity in his legs moving up and down the field? Because Dorgu, for example, is doing some of that running for him. There were moments
so we'll learn
against...
more now then?
Possibly. And this is where I'm a bit nervous in that let's take Mason Mount. Let's take Mason Mount as a left-winger situation. And I think that is probably option 2 for Michael Carrick in my hypothetical right now. Mount and Shaw have already got bags of experience playing with each other, particularly with England, and an England team that had Steve Holland as an assistant coach. So those two know each other well. However, I'm going to throw this to you, Andy. What does the prospect of Luke Shaw and Mason Mount running up and down the left wing in 2026, does that fill you with dread?
I think it needs to be put into context. Luke Shaw is not the same player at 30 as he was when he was 21. I'm glad that Mount is back figuring. These are two players who were just not figuring last season when Luke played 12 and 15 games in the last 2 years. He's going to go back past that combined total in the next few weeks, despite Manchester United having hardly any games this year. I did a big piece on him for The Athletic at the end of November around that Palace away game, and I spoke to a lot of people to get a sense of, what is Luke Shaw in this season. And I think the club's assessment was he's exceptionally calm on the ball. He understands the game. He plays well through the lines. He takes the ball forward well. He's done well this season. 1 game rather than 2 per week helps him, since injuries can creep up on you more as you go from playing no games to 2 games a week. So that has helped him this season. I think his honesty is appreciated. He had a poor game against Manchester City away, not at home, earlier on in the season, and admitted as much. And then in less than a year from now, he can talk to other teams like Harry Maguire. So these people are not Manchester United's medium-term future. It's how long they stay in the current setup while a team or squad is built around them. The Premier League proven, they're hugely experienced. They've had issues with injuries, and I'm talking for both of them. But when they're fit and playing well, as he has done in the last couple of weeks especially, then I've got no problems with either of them playing.
Yeah, you've written about Harry Maguire, Andy. We spoke about him on the extra episode in terms of the compromise that might need to be reached from United and Maguire on wages if he is to stay beyond the end of this season. So go back and have a listen and a watch of that if you want to know more about that aspect. But the article you've written, you pointed out how good United's record is this season when Maguire has started. They've lost once and they've beaten Chelsea, Manchester City, Liverpool and Arsenal. He's only started 6 games.
Basically, big game player, isn't he? Starts against the best teams and wins. The only time he's started and United have lost this season was against Brentford, if I'm not mistaken. And we put that article out this week, and the reaction to it is overwhelmingly positive. But, I've written about Maguire at other points this season, and it hasn't been like that. So you can't get totally carried away in the mood just because you've won a couple of matches. United needs Harry Maguire to be playing far more than he has done this season. I think there's a few factors. He's waited until he's 100% fit before coming back. In the past, he's been put under pressure to come back when he's not been 100% fit. I think he's got a good partnership with Lisandro Martinez. Michael Carrick likes him. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer absolutely loved him because he feels that he's someone who makes first contact, wins everything in the air, puts his head where the sun don't shine. But he also earns a lot of money. And Manchester United have got to make a decision. Do we offer him a new contract? He's happy in Manchester. This is a lad who comes out in a rash when he goes more than 30 miles where he's from. He's just about within that. Sheffield to Manchester, he just about makes that. But he's been brilliant. He was man of the match at the weekend. I think his last man of the match was against Lyon. If you're paying someone that much, they've got to be playing all the time. I think there's been times at the start of this season where United may have thought Lenny Yoro will be the man, and he's had a bumpy ride. Aidan Heaven is someone United are going to keep watching, but how can you watch him when there's so few games? He would have been playing this week if Manchester United would have been in the Europa League. So that's another negative. I think Maguire is another who benefits from the one game a week at his age. And I can see all the case for keeping him. You need experience there. It's been a very unsettled defensive system this year. There's been times where De Ligt's been the main man. He's now injured. Maguire's been out injured. Now he's the main man. So then it plays into Shaw credit that he's there absolutely all of the time.
I think the experience point, Critch, is an important one that Andy's made there, because there is doubt or speculation, at least, about Bruno Fernandes's future at Old Trafford beyond the end of the campaign. If you were to lose Bruno and Harry Maguire doesn't agree a new contract, and Casemiro has also obviously already stated that he's leaving in the summer, you're beginning to look around the squad and wonder who the leaders of the team are. Now, obviously, there's still members of the leadership group who'd still be around it, Diogo Dalot, Lisandro Martinez, but those three, Maguire, Fernandes and Casemiro, do feel like pillars of this team, whether they're wearing the armband or not. They lead by example, the big voices, the people who are respected. That would be a massive hole for United, wouldn't it, if those three went?
It would be, and they're never easy holes to fill when you lose personality, because it's one part of the equation that you put into when you're doing your recruitment, but you've also got to think about the age of the player, the quality, obviously, where they fit in the team, and it becomes something that often falls down the list of priorities and is something that's built up over time. Now, if you lose a lot of that experience and leadership qualities in one summer, then there is a detrimental effect to that. And I think it's something United have to be aware of. I'm thinking of that 6-person leadership group there. So you've got Bruno, you've got Harry Maguire, Tom Heaton's in it as well, whether he'll be around. We don't know. He seems to stick around anyway, so perhaps there's another contract extension there. But then you're left with Lisandro Martinez, Diogo Dalot, Nussim Mazraoui. Casemiro wasn't in that group, interestingly, but I feel that certainly, I think it's evident from watching him play on the pitch that he carries a burden of responsibility for this team, and that a lot of players look up to him. You only have to see some of the reactions on the pitch at the Emirates the other day at full time. So, and you know, we haven't really spoken about the Casemiro news the other week, and I think a lot of players in his position, there's been a lot of talk about him during his time at United, particularly about the money that he's on as well. But you know, one thing I think you can say about Casemiro is that a lot of players who were 5 times Champions League winners might come on that salary and just be here for a pay packet. And I don't think he has been. He's really invested himself within the club. You can see in the way that he carries himself on the pitch, as I'm saying, that he feels like a United player, and that is going to be a void that needs to be filled in the summer when he goes. I would be careful if I was United of just, be wary that if you lose a lot of these players at once, then are you going to have enough personalities within a dressing room to step into that void all at once as well? It can be a huge demand on younger players. And one thing we have seen, I think, and one thing that's been a pattern over the last few years is perhaps a little too much responsibility being put on younger players' shoulders, I should say. That has been a theme, and you need characters around the dressing room to ease that. And United needs to be careful that they don't lose all that at once.
Yeah, Andy, you've been asked repeatedly since you said it. I don't even know how long ago you said it, but you mentioned it was a complicated dressing room for Manchester United. I don't think there's a week that goes by that we don't have a comment or an email that asks, how complicated is it now? But it does feel like the dressing room is in a better place. And unquestionably, the players we're talking about will have had a huge hand in making that the case. So again, it's something that needs to be considered, isn't it?
It was deeply complicated, and I know Ruben Amorim is absolutely not flavour of the month at the moment, but it is to his credit that he made some inroads into making it less complicated by moving some of the more difficult players on. The dressing room now, from all the indications I get, is a good place, but you are also dealing with hugely egotistical international sports stars who've all got their own personal perspective as well as the team perspective. You know, they're talking to their agents, they're talking to the people, you know, what about my next contract? Where do I land in all of this? You know, do you think Kobbie Mainoo's been delighted all season? I'd be stunned if he had been, because he's not been playing. And it's great that he's come back in now, and you've seen him playing well, just like fantastic. I'd love him to be a long-term Manchester United player and get a bigger contract. But there are always issues to deal with. Am I getting a new contract? You know, as we speak today, Harry Maguire has got no indication whatsoever as to whether he's getting a contract at Manchester United next season. And the club have got to do what's right for the club, and I think they will do. And I actually think this sports director model is an improvement on the past models. Players are bought for the club, not for an individual manager. I think the intention to improve Manchester United squad, the team, is absolutely genuine from the decision makers. They strengthened the attackers ahead of this season. The focus will switch to midfield for next season, but it's about getting the balance right. And as the lads have said, you can't just lose all that experience, because we all love Lenny Yoro and think that he's going to be a huge talent in football. But when he makes a mistake, which costs a goal, then you think he's not quite ready to be playing all the time yet. There are elements within his game. And you can say the same about Patrick Dorgu, and he's had a fantastic run of it at the moment. Or you've got a Shaw and Maguire, and you think, did they just do it for another year or two? Because they've still got the standards, because there's still really important people in the dressing room. Even when Maguire was getting all that abuse, he was still really well respected within that dressing room. And it may be that compromises are needed, compromises on wages from both parts, but that's just normal business of running a football club, and the reality of still paying off the fact that United, A, has been a loss-making club, and B, didn't qualify for European football this year. It's essential for United to get back into Europe next year. And if they do, all those players, their contracts go up between 15 and 20% if you're playing Champions League football. So there's a financial motivation for all of them to succeed and absolutely smash Fulham this week and Tottenham next week.
Let's see how that one works out. Just before we talk about transfers, it's quiet, so don't expect too much from the last conversation of this show, but stay tuned for that. Let's talk about the youth team, because Adam Lawrence has returned to Manchester United after 5 months at Newcastle. He will be the lead coach now of the under-21s. I want to call him friend of the show because he's been on Talk of the Devils before. We spoke to him last season, was it, when he was the head of the under-18s, which of course now is Darren Fletcher's role. The youth team beat Derby County in the FA Youth Cup 4th round last week, I think it was. They won 2-1 in extra time. Chido Obi, one of the players on the score sheet that day. They'll face Oxford away in the last 16 of that competition. Kai Rooney, I'm sure you will have seen, played that game, played at Old Trafford for the first time. Dad Wayne watching in the stands. In fact, it was like an old boys club, the director's box that day, because you had Wayne Rooney there, you had Darren Gibson there, I think Johnny Evans was there, certainly Michael Carrick was there. And that aspect, Carl, has caught people's eye, because that's not the only game Michael Carrick has been to. He's also watched the under-21s against Brighton and against Sporting Club of Portugal too. And obviously the former manager, Ruben Amorim, was criticised for not being around the youth team much. So it has caught people's eye, that. Yeah,
I think that's an easy win, a good way to re-establish some old traditions or re-establish a new normal for Michael Carrick or whoever becomes the new permanent head coach next season as well. I think it is important that the head coach watches academy games wherever possible. I think it helps remind these young players that there's a pathway into the first team. And it also, I think in times of crisis or injury, is that sort of, look, Patrick Dorgu's injured. You could potentially, you play well in front of the boss, you could potentially be brought over into training, and then we'll see how you can be for the first team. So, I like the fact that Carrick is watching these games. I quite enjoyed, did you hear Wayne Rooney explain his attire? He was in his pajamas, wasn't he? He was in his pajamas by accident. So he put his clothes out thinking it was just a tracksuit bottom. But instead he picked up a set of pajamas because when you're Wayne Rooney, your pair of pajamas and a pair of tracksuit bottoms are one and the same. It's a good pair of pajamas. It's Wayne Rooney. Come on. We know how much money he was on when he was playing for United.
Well, yeah, he's admitted as much, hasn't he, on podcasts before, exactly how much he was getting paid. Critch, in terms of the players who might have a chance of stepping up with Dorgu being out, I guess Shea Lacey is probably the one who people will expect to be given an opportunity, at least to be around the travelling squads again. He was so unlucky with that red card. I still reflect on it now and wonder, maybe he wouldn't have been involved against Manchester City from the start with the players returning from AFCON, but it just felt really cruel for him considering the impact he was having, and he'd come so close to having a proper impact for the first team as well. He scored actually in the Brighton youth game, which is a bit poetic considering the red card came against Brighton in the seniors as well.
Absolutely. He came so close to having an impact on the first team. Like literally about a few inches, right? And that with that strike against Burnley, which
he still had an impact, didn't he? But in terms of like that headline moment, I suppose.
Exactly, just that name in the record book stuff, and a moment that would have defined, like, would have lifted everybody at that point, at a point where everybody needed a bit of a lift. First game after Leeds and after Amorim leaving. Yeah, I think I was chatting to people back in November time when the AFCON issue was sort of live and it wasn't quite clear when the players would be going, and you're asking, well, if they do go and when they do go, who could step up? And Shea Lacey's name was the name that was being mentioned to me at the time then, and I think we did see that there was a few players that got an opportunity in and around the squad, but he was the first one really that was given that chance, even under Ruben Amorim. And so you'd be looking again for him to potentially step up over the next couple of weeks. I felt bad for him with the Brighton red card. I also felt like as soon as he kicked the ball away, I was like, oh no. Because you just know that referees, you would like them to show a little bit of leniency in those situations, but it's rare that they do because there's a rule book that they have to stick to and to follow. And I felt terrible for him, but it's an experience that he'll no doubt have learnt from. Perhaps it's, like you say, maybe wasn't always going to necessarily start in the games that United had to come after that. But now perhaps there's an opportunity, particularly with Dorgu out, that he can step up. And look, I think we've seen enough from him so far to show that he can make an impact. We're just hoping that he gets the opportunity.
Andy, one thing that we haven't talked about actually, and we've mentioned Ruben Amorim a couple of times within this conversation, is the fact that we haven't heard from him since he left Manchester United. Now, normally, certainly the tradition in recent years has been that managers would release a statement or at least say something, thank the fans for the support. He has had tremendous support despite the troubles that he had at Old Trafford. Are you surprised that we haven't heard anything from him?
I am a bit. I think I'm disappointed as well because he got huge support from the club, from Manchester United fans, to the point that rival fans were just saying, why are you backing this man? It's clearly not working out. And I think that loyalty, you could say it was misguided, but I think United fans were proud to get behind the manager. So for him to say nothing is a surprise. To be fair, I don't think I need to be fair. I think he should say something, but the way in which managers depart has changed. So I remember when David Moyes going, I got a thing called a text message going, can you just pass on my thanks to the hardcore fans? And that was it. And then the extreme would be Ole Gunnar Solskjaer with his exit video, which was really uncomfortable
completely
to watch, wasn't it? And I think Ruben Amorim just thought, yeah, whatever, I'm going. I've got me, he'll get paid off. And I think United fans are feeling pretty down on him at the moment, and I can understand that why. People go, people come. You mentioned Adam Lawrence. Good that he's back. Spent a full day with him a couple of years ago. He's been on this podcast as well. Brilliant job at Charlton Athletic. He's proper like South London, Bermondsey, if I'm not mistaken. And you've got to have a connection with some of them Cockneys. We let Carl onto this podcast. London is the biggest city in Western Europe. It is a football factory. And I know I'm joking about this, but it's a city that produces footballers. There's more Cockneys in Luke Shaw's from there. There's a few other Londoners. Mason Mount's he's Portsmouth, innit? But Brighton and Hove Albion have got a player who's about to break into their first team who was at Manchester United, and he's a Southerner. And I did a bit of research into him this week because United let him go 2 or 3 years ago. And I got told he was in a group of real tough Northerners. So to have an Adam Lawrence in there with a bit of the Cockney twang, talking about the things that Londoners talk about, house prices, how much your house is worth, how much your house has gone up and down, jelly deals, all sort of that stuff. You've got to make them feel at home. Welcome back, Adam.
I did not expect that conversation to go in that direction, but thank you, Andy. Before we finish then, we've got to talk transfers. I guess there are literally days, hours, I don't know where the counter is up to before the window slams shut. There's been a bit of titillation with Cole Palmer, rumours going around this week and all this sort of stuff, which is the type of stories that seem to circulate in the final days of transfer windows. But Critch, anything to keep an eye on in these remaining hours before it slams shut?
I've done enough podcasts with David Ornstein over the years to know that I should never rule anything out, okay? Because then you just look foolish if something does happen. So let's not rule anything out. But the tone of conversations throughout has been that things will be extremely quiet. And that United, I think, as Andy said on this podcast multiple times already, and I hate to just repeat the message, but the focus has always been, well, look, if we can accelerate something that we want to do long term from the summer, then we can do it. That may require players to move out in the other direction as well. But other than that, other than those opportunities arising, not to expect too much. And I haven't had a huge sense that changes in the next few days. Now, as deadlines draw nearer, I think minds focus. I think people get desperate. Situations can change. Players who perhaps aren't getting the minutes that they want would look at the situation and think, well, actually, could I go out on loan to this place and maybe, not earn as much money as I could do by sitting here just to get the minutes? There's a World Cup on the horizon, we've got to remember. I wonder if that sharpens a few minds and changes focus over the next few days. But at the moment, it's as quiet as it has been since January the 1st, and it has been throughout, and that's been the consistent message.
Carl, Andy, anything to add?
I've given my consistent message, and I'm glad that Critch has picked up on it, and I'm not going to add to that.
Okay, we'll leave it there then on Talk of the Devils. Thank you very much for staying for that scintillating transfer update to finish today's show.
I tried.
Critch, Carl,
come on, I tried.
It's the reality. That's all you can report. Critch, Carl, Andy, thank you so much for being with us as always. Thank you for listening and watching along as well. We'll be back after Fulham. Let's hope we've still got smiles on our faces. We'll see. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already. Like the video and also get involved in the comments too. And click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TOT Devils on Instagram, X and TikTok. Thanks for watching.